Hello, my friends, and welcome to our very first lecture in our small group communication class. We will have already talked about this in class, but I am Dr. Meredith Styer, and I want to welcome you to our first online recorded video lecture. Now, as I've mentioned before, these lectures do not cover every single thing in your textbook. So please make sure to carefully and thoroughly do the readings, to engage with them in the way I've asked you to do in your reading and lecture responses, and to make sure you pay attention during these lectures as I cover a couple of highlights from each of the chapters that we read through. With that being said, let's go ahead and jump into two elements of content that I want to specifically explain to you and one activity that we have for today. Let's begin with what happens when you have to work in a small group. Now, the first thing that I want to draw your attention to, this is covered in your reading, but I want to cover it a little bit more here, is that there are two different ways we can approach or think about working in groups. We can think about these as individuals all coming together, sort of I am the important one, I am the center of my own universe, rugged individualism approach. Or, as your textbook says, we can come at small group communication and small group interaction from a systems approach. And the metaphor there is the idea of we're all one body and we make up many different parts of that body. So this still respects that we are individuals, we have individual gifts and abilities and thoughts and beliefs and everything else, but we all do different vitally important work to make the group function. Think about the idea that an ear can't do the same work that a hand does, but without either one, it would be awful hard to clap after listening to a symphony. And so one of the things I'd like you to think about as you're responding to this lecture and as you're responding to our reading today is to think about the difference between an individual's approach to thinking about small groups or a systems approach to thinking about small groups. Specifically, make sure you understand the four characteristics of a systems perspective on groups. We will be working with that in class, so make sure you're ready to talk about that a little bit. The second thing I want to draw everyone's attention to is the idea of the four phases of group development. So your textbook points out that there are lots of different ways of thinking about group development, but I want you to be thinking in this four phases mode, with the idea that groups always begin with a stage of orientation, work through elements of conflict in order to get to a place of emergence and reinforcement before going back through those stages again. It's important to recognize that each of these phases, as your textbook notes, is actually really important. If we skip over the conflict stage, that raises specific problems. If we skip over the reinforcement stage, that raises certain problems. And so please make sure that you're ready to talk about the problems that might be associated with being in each of these stages, but also what happens if you skip over any of these stages as well. One last piece of content I want to draw your attention to is Poole's multiple sequence model of group work. This is one we'll be working with in class and talking about for one of our activities, so please make sure that you have a firm grasp on Poole's theory so that we can talk about it and see how it might apply in your group. And then finally, for today's response activity, go ahead and write this one down. You can refer to pages 13 and 14 from your textbook for the following questions. Think of a group you're part of here at Georgia College. Now, this should be a group outside of your small group communication class, but you're probably part of a Bible study or a sorority or a fraternity or perhaps a news magazine or one of the news organizations or something to do with the business school or whatever it might be. Think about a group that you are a part of. Identify areas where that group has specific types of diversity and where your group lacks specific types of diversity. Now here you'll need to go back and look at how the textbook defines diversity, because of course it's race, gender, religious background, ethnicity, and language, and national origin, but it's also economic status and relationship status, or ability and disability, physical ability, and educational backgrounds, along with other things. And then based on the diversity of your group, what problems might you face and what advantages might you have? Again, you should refer to the textbook if you need any more information on that. Thank you all so much for turning into this brief review of our lecture content for today, and I can't wait to see you in class.